Okay, today I'm going to demonstrate how to create a Milky Way image out of two exposures blended in Photoshop, two Milky Way shots. Basically, how to make a shot like this. And first of all, I go in Lightroom. I have two images. I have the sky tracked image, and then I have the foreground tracked image. And the difference is I've shot the sky at ISO 800 for 2 minutes, and I've shot the foreground ISO 1600 for 2 minutes. Now, because the exposure is different, what you do is what I first do is I'll select the brighter one, the one I shot at ISO 1600, select both images, and I'll go up to Settings, and then Match Total Exposures. And what that'll do is that'll bring up the exposure of the tracked sky shot to match the tracked foreground shot. And then I go ahead and just load these. I'll go and edit them in Photoshop. And if you need to set your profile correction too, I did that earlier just because it's a pain. It's a manual 50mm lens. Anyway, now that they're loaded in Photoshop, I will take the Quick Select tool, and I'll start down at the bottom. And if you start down at the bottom of the quick selection and then just kind of drag it across, it will select, get the little dancing ants, I guess is what they're called, across the whole scene. And it wasn't perfect, so I will zoom in. I just use Control plus to zoom in, and then I use the space bar to grab and drag around. That's kind of what I'll be doing. And Control minus or Control O, Control or Command O, that'll make it full screen. So I'll be doing that a lot, but Control plus, I'll come in all the way, and then I'll just make sure it's got a hold of this. There we go. And then you can hold down the Alt key, and that'll just, yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. This is just really rough. And you just kind of examine, make sure it's got all the edges. It looks like it got some hot pixels to clean up too. There we go. It's right there. And this little foreground brush doesn't really matter that much. I'll show you why here in just a second. Then I'll come across the other side and make sure we're all good over here. Yeah, we'll just get a little bit more of that. Why not? And that'll get all of this in here. Take it all away. It doesn't usually do edges very well because the edges just get a little bit soft with my lens. So now that we have the entirety of this barn selected, I'll go back to full screen, and then I'll just Control or Command C to copy, and that'll copy everything in the dancing ants thing. And I'll go ahead and select my Move tool, and then I'll make this big again. And then I'll just Control or Command V, which will drop the selection on it as a second layer. And you just go ahead and drop it down there. Now, it doesn't exactly have to be perfect here, because there's a little bit of blurring you can see. I try and get it like, so there's this minimal blurring. So we'll get in here like, yeah, that's the edge of it. Yeah, about right there. Just make it easy. Sometimes I've even rotated it to make it so there's less blurring, because the less blurring you can deal with, the better. Okay, now that I've got that done, I'll just go back full screen again, and then I will Control or Command and hold Control or Command, and then click and select both of these. And I'll just go ahead and merge them right now, right here with a right click, and then merge layers. And then that makes this all one image. Now there's two different ways to clean up this blur along the edge that I use. I use the clone stamp tool, and you can just, you can just cheat and grab some stars from here and then just paint them over that like that. But what I like to do first is I like to come over to this image, and then you can Control D or Command D. We'll deselect that, and then I'll just use the clone stamp, and I'll come up to like a point, or I like the edge, the top edge of the barn, so I'll just hold down the Alt key and select. There. Then I'll come over here and I'll find it on this one as well. And then I'm using the bracket keys. That'll the right bracket will make it bigger and the left bracket will make it smaller. That's a really handy feature. So you don't have to right click and set your size. But I like to set it and then I make sure it's more or less aligned with the edge. I like to go all the way down and then I'll click and that'll set the stamp. Just so I don't manipulate anything. Anyway, and then we'll kind of clean up the edge. There's a little bit of blur here. A little blur. Yep. So we can do it like that, but then we start to get some star trailing, and that's kind of what I was afraid of a little bit. That'll give you a nice hard edge to work with rather than this blurry edge. I'll show you. I'll just go through and I'll do the blurry edges really quick. Get all the blurred out. This will make the edges fairly sharp. Just come all the way down it. A little bit of a painstaking process. Now I told you this brush didn't matter because I've got a little bit of smoke in the area. And there's no stars about from here on, so I can just go big and I can just paint that there, and then I'm painting this here. That'll clean that all up because there's no star trailing anywhere in here. So it makes it a little convenient. Oh, and for my brush, I always do about a 40% hardness brush. That is, or you right click to bring up that menu, but always about 40% hardness because it keeps everything pretty neat. And I'm just making sure there's nothing really, no real blur on that. There's a little bit of blur there. See, there's no stars in that area, so you can get away with doing it. What we're doing here is, I know there's trails, but what I'm doing is I'm kind of defining an edge, getting rid of the initial blur, and it's kind of defining the edge of my barn. So this is the first step that I do right here. Okay, now I've gone all the way around it, and now I can go back to my secondary where I'll just take just a little sample there with Alt, and then I'll come in here, and it's just, I mean, there's nothing you can really do to make that any different. And I know this is kind of cheating. Like I could always go behind the bar and take a Milky Way shot and then composite that in and stuff like that. People do that a lot too. But I'm too lazy. I just, I'll just paint some stars over it. What the heck? It's not that big a deal. Try not to get too close to the edge. And you eat a star or two every now and then, but I'm not that picky. Oops. I actually like that star. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, I'm not going to undo everything I do. I got a bad habit of going too far, and then if I make a mistake, then it's like, oh, shoot, now I've got to go all the way back and do it all over again if I make a mistake. So do short brushes, like do a little brush, click, little brush. Oh, see, I made a little mistake there. So short brushes are about the best. And I always pick just an area directly above it because the tone's more or less the same. I don't think there's anything on this edge that was bad. There's nothing in there that was bad. Going up on it. Yeah, nothing really in there. I'll just take a little bit more of that. Let's see here. There was a little bit of star trailing on that. So I'll just take it, and it's just kind of a manual labor intensive here. The key is trying to keep the same tone. Like the Milky Way will have different colors, and it's got a bunch of different colors in it. So I like to pick an area right next to it so that I keep a fairly consistent color transition. Like if there's darks, like if the Milky Way is right, if the Milky Way was right here, there'd be some dark spots and there'd be some light spots. So if I know that it's supposed to be dark clear over to here, then I'll just take some dark from it and paint over it lightly, and just try and make it look like it's more natural without ruining the structure too much. And now I'll take a little sample over here. It's mostly just taking little samples. I like using that first brush to get rid of all the blur. And it's sloppy. And see, because we matched the total exposures on that first, when we matched the total exposures, it gave us a nice, copy. Alright. It's kind of a painstaking. Just kind of go through. Like if I double up a star, I'll just go and delete the star. Let's see, we'll delete you. I got some hot pixels to clean up. I'm going to have to pause and do that. But yeah, that's basically how you do it right there for that. After this, now after I've done this, I check my edges. Like I messed up that edge right there. So what I'll do is I'll come back over to this one again. I'll select that. Come over just like I did before. Make it big again and line it up. Alright, and then I'll zoom all the way in and just click right there, just set the brush. Then I'll come over here and I'll just kind of clean up the edge real quick. Just make sure the edge didn't get blurred, with my clone stamping. But now I'm going to pause for a second and take care of the hot pixels. Okay, now that I've taken care of the hot pixels, I'll just go ahead and save it with Control S. I'll just save it, and that'll dump it back into Lightroom. And now from this point on, I will go ahead and begin my processing. Everybody kind of edits the Milky Way a little bit different, so I'll just give you just a quick demonstration of how I do it. First thing I like to do is, try and make sure the horizon's fairly level. The tracker moves, it twists sideways as it's going, so you can always have to correct that. But first thing I like to do is just bring up my shadows and drop my highlights. I don't like to drop the highlights 100% because sometimes it'll introduce a little bit extra color noise in here. Like it'll get really grainy. Yeah, like right in here it's really grainy now. So I like to just save it a little bit so it's not as bad of the grain. And then the very first step I do from here is I will take an adjustment brush. And I shot this at 3550K, which is fairly cool. So I will open I'll double click on Effect. That will drop all of it to 0. Then I'll come down and make sure my feather is 100%. No, my feather is 0. And auto mask is enabled, and the size will just get it fairly big. And then I'll take, because the sky, I increased the exposure on it. I'll take dehaze to about 25, and then I know this will need to be warmed up, so I'll just take that to about 15. And I like the magenta, so I'll probably take that up to about 15 as well. And that's just kind of a base. I'll change that a lot once I get to going. But then I'll just paint the sky with it. And it'll look a little weird right now because I haven't saturated or anything, I had added any saturation. Then I'll push O, which will give me an overlay. And then I'll just kind of go through here and get that nebula. Make sure and see with auto mask it will just, if you have nice hard lines like this, it'll be great. Like normal Milky Way shots, like when I do Milky Way panoramas, they're just masking the sky can take a long time. Alright, now that that's done, I don't quite want it that warm yet. And there was a lot of smoke on the horizon, so I don't know, it's going to kind of mess with the tone. But after I get that set, I'll go down and I will go all the way down to, I like to use camera calibration, version 4, for my saturation, because it gives me the 3 different color channels. You can do this in, you can probably do this in Photoshop But I like to do all my tone editing in Lightroom. So I usually just take the blues all the way to 100%, and I'll take the greens and give it a little bit. And that'll just saturate all the blues and give it a nice little tone. But I don't like how strong the yellows are, so I'll just come back up to the HSL and I'll drop my yellows just a little bit. And maybe just brighten them up just a touch. Just to kind of give it a little bit more of a hazy look. Now that that's done, I don't like how hazy the sky is, so I'll just take the dehaze and bring that up. I don't like to do it too much because it can get kind of gritty if you go too much. About 40. And then from here I'll go down, and I like to hit the tone curve, and all I ever use on the tone curve with Milky Way shots is lights, because I've noticed that really brings out the lights. I mean, if you really want to enhance the stars and bring them out, it'll bring out all the lights. And what that'll do, well, I usually go to about 90, is that'll actually lighten all the color as well. So if you don't want that bright of yellows, then you can just take its luminance back down. No, I'll actually take the saturation back down. There we go. Keep that under control. And then just kind of play with it until it kind of matches the tone of the sky. And then from here, I've got this main brush selected still. I might give it some blacks. I take the color, give it more of a night feel. There we go. Yeah, taking that down. Maybe not that far. I like to, don't like it to be too dark. But then I will take a new brush from here. Double click on Effect to reset it. Then I'll come down and I'll unselect Auto Mask, and then I'll take my feather all the way up. And then I'll make it all the way small like that. And then I'll do a blacks brush. I'll take blacks and I'll take it down to about -5, because I already did some blacks to it. And then I'll zoom in to about 1 to 2. No. 1 to 3. There we go. Get fairly close, and then I'll just take all the black areas of the Milky Way and I'll just go ahead and paint those. And it's just kind of a rough. Try not to go over the white areas too much, but this just gives a little bit more definition. There's a little black out here and a little black there. And there's a lot of character to the core of the Milky Way. So I'll just kind of come through and I'll just paint everywhere where it's dark or where there's little darker tones. This is kind of something that I started doing this year. And it kind of gives it a little bit more pop. Just a little bit of custom blacks. So it's not some big general blacks, Just come down here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Okay, right there. I'll push the overlay button to see if I missed anything critical, which I don't. Oh no, I missed this whole section in here. I like to take a peek every now and then to make sure I'm getting everything I want to. Yeah, get him over there too. Whoops. There's my blacks brush. And then if you ever want to see what you've done, you can just take it and then add as much blacks as you want. I don't like to go too heavy saturated because it's kind of a custom brush, so maybe 7. There we go. Just bring out, maybe too much. About 6. And then after this, I'll just do a whites brush. I'll do another one, and I like to take that up to about 25 to start off with. And I'll just come in here and paint the whiter areas of the Milky Way. Give them a little bit more flavor. See, bringing up the lights brings up the stars, all of the stars in general. These custom brushes really bring out the brighter areas, enhance it a little bit. I'll bring that up. Sometimes I'll even take highlights, bring up the highlights a little bit. Because I drop the highlights to begin with, and that takes a little bit out of the stars sometimes too. Come on in. And then from here I'll just kind of play a little bit with the The hues, see, we get a little bit of red, purple, or magenta coming in there, so I'm not sure. I don't know, it just kind of all depends on what you have, like white balance. You know, I used to go seriously blue, but I've kind of adopted the, I guess the sky bacon tone is what they call it. A little bit warmer tones. Brings out a little bit more definition, I've noticed. And just kind of right there. And then now on the foreground, I'll take a new brush and I'll get auto mask set again. I'll drop the feather just like I did for the sky. And I like my foreground to be a little bit cooler, just to give it a more night feel. My wife said, my wife always says, oh, it looks like a day shot, you know. I'm like, well, no, I want to kind of make it look like a night shot. And I listen to her sometimes. So just mask it again. It's nice when you have nice hard lines. And now I'll just kind of play with the tones a little bit, cool them down just a little bit, just to give it a more night feel. Take the greens just a little bit, because the green plus adding some greens to these old barns kind of gives them a little bit more of a old feel to them. And just to have a look at the difference of what I just did. Right there. See, it's kind of burnt orange. And now we've kind of got a little bit more of a night feel. A little bit more natural too. I'll warm it up just a tad, just to kind of balance it with the sky. You don't want your subject to be too far off of what the sky is. But I kind of like that right there. Maybe give it a little bit blacks in. Just kind of play with it a little bit. Clarity can kind of give a little bit more definition to the individual boards and things like that. But for the most part, that's pretty much how I edit my Milky Way shots. I mean, it's not too complicated once you get the, I don't know, especially for these track shots. So back when I would do untracked shots, it was a little bit different ball game. But for track shots, you have nice hard lines and yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. Now looking at the whole image right before I export it, see, I like to edit for social media. And when you drop this on a white background in Facebook, I mean, if you have it too dark, it just won't look right on a white background. So I'll let it go like this, but sometimes I'll actually add a little bit extra. I like to add a little bit extra contrast. That'll bring out a little bit more, you know, give everything more contrast, but then I'll counteract that with a little bit of brightness, a little bit of exposure. And see, the difference is it's really subtle, but you can give it a little bit darker feel. See, the balance is trying to get a darker feel, but still showing all the detail and then making it look good on social media. Because everybody has a white, I mean, look at Facebook. Facebook's terrible. You know, you have to go so white in order to get a dark image to look good against a white background. And that's one thing I really learned about my editing. And when this prints out, like if you had this printed out on a metal print, you'd want it a little bit lighter because metal prints print a little bit darker, and most people don't have good enough lighting in their house to make all of the lightness show up on the metal print. So if you export it a little bit brighter than you normally would, this will look good on cell phones with dim screens. This will look good on social media, and this will print out a lot better. And even though it doesn't really look like a night image per se, having it this bright makes a big difference. But anyway, that's just pretty much how I edit my Milky Way shots. I'm ready to export this guy, and here she is. Alright. Here. Ready to go. We got a couple others tonight too. There's another one. A little more magenta in this guy that time just because I was in the mood. I got that one too, you know, a little bit different tone because of a little bit further up. But yeah, that's pretty much how I edit my Milky Way shots.